The Grinding Dark by David Hall 3004 2025, Chapter List, Chapter 1, The Tuning Fork's Curse Chapter 2, Harmonic Bleed Chapter 3, The Collapse of Faith Chapter 4, The Conductor's March Chapter 5, Echoes of the Silent Ones Chapter 6, The Silence Between Stars Chapter 7, Harmony Absolute Chapter 8, Dissonantia. Summary: The Grinding Dark is a horror story set in the Warhammer 40k universe, where an unnatural and dissonant sound emerges from the warp, threatening to unravel the very fabric of reality. This sound, known as the choir, gradually spreads across the galaxy, manipulating and warping entire worlds into resonant landscapes. The Emperor's faithful are corrupted, their minds distorted by the song. As the power of the choir grows stronger, the story follows the rise of the Conductor, an entity embodying the will of the choir, as it reshapes the galaxy in its image, turning the Imperium into a place of suffocating harmony. Amidst this chaos, a group of survivors known as the Silent Ones, individuals immune to the influence of the choir, attempt to resist its overwhelming power. Yet, as the song consumes everything, the boundaries between order and chaos blur, and the Conductor's reign seems absolute. In the end, a final, fractured silence emerges, marking the collapse of the choir and the galaxy's descent into an uncertain new order, where the echoes of the past remain, but no melody is left to guide the way forward. Chapter 1, The Hemorrhage Choir. The Adeptus Mechanicus research vessel Imperium drifted in high orbit over the dead forge moon of Belix 9, a rust-scabbed satellite turned to slag a millennium ago during the Horus Heresy. Its jagged rings spun around it like the shards of a broken skull, and nothing living had set foot there for over 3,000 years. Until now, inside the belly of the Imperium, the air tasted like machine oil and ionized blood. The ship had gone dark 12 hours ago. No vox signals, no astropathic screams. A rescue team had been dispatched from the nearby battle group. 7, 10 hardened Imperial Navy voidsmen, 3 Skitrii escorts, and a single Lord Xenos Inquisitorial attaché, Interrogator Valis. They breached through the aft loading bay, maglocking their boots to the hull and cutting into the airlock. When the seal broke, a rush of stale, fetid air poured into their suits, causing several of the voidsmen to gag and dry heave within their helmets. Biosigns? Valis's voice was distorted through the vox. None, said Skitrii Alpha 6 Red. That was a lie. One of the voidsmen's Auspex units chirped. Reading movement in the engine shrines. Faint, could be servitors. Servitors don't make Auspex units stammer, Valis snapped. Advance. Las guns hot. They moved in disciplined silence, rifles raised, scanning for threats. The halls were flayed open, literally. Wiring hung from the ceilings like entrails. The walls were slick, not with condensation, but with blood and filth. Strange, rhythmic thumping noises echoed through the corridors, as if the ship itself had a heartbeat. They found the first body slumped in a cogitator chamber, or what was left of him. A tech priest, flayed from the waist down, mechadendrites ripped out and twisted into a crown jammed into his upper skull. His eyes were missing, and something black and alive had been poured into the sockets. Looks like ritual work, muttered one of the voidsmen. John. He didn't know how right he was. The team advanced into the central shrine complex, past piles of dismembered servo skulls and shattered data looms. The vox went dead again. Skitrii Alpha 6 Red began to twitch. Smoke poured from its cranial ports. Then the chanting began, low, wet, mechanical and guttural, not made by any normal larynx. It rose from the vents, from behind walls, from beneath the grates. A grinding choir of broken vox recordings and voices speaking in dialects not meant for human comprehension. One of the voidsmen, Corda, suddenly screamed. He dropped to his knees, clutching his helmet. Get it out! He wailed, clawing at his faceplate. Before anyone could move, his helmet burst, exploded, as if something had ignited inside his head. Blood and bone sprayed in every direction. His brain had liquefied. His corpse jittered for a moment, fingers scrabbling across the floor, before going limp. What the feth was that? Shouted John. Alpha 6 Red began firing its galvanic rifle wildly into the shadows. The sound of static laughter erupted from its Vox unit as it turned and executed the other two Skitrii with pinpoint bursts, one shot each. Headshots. Both collapsed without a sound. Valis fired his plasma pistol and vaporized Alpha 6's head. It crumpled in a smoking heap, still twitching, Vox static laughing even in death. The lights went out. Total blackness. Only the bobbing flashlight beams of the remaining Voidsmen remained, casting long, jerky shadows. Then, scraping, something long and wet dragged across the floor behind them, back-to-back formation. Valis barked, but the shadows didn't obey light anymore. One of the men, Helsa, turned to fire, but the dark behind him rose up like liquid tar and impaled him with jagged, metallic tentacles. He was lifted from the floor, armor screaming as he thrashed. Something sang to him, a corrupted Bnharic cant, words burrowing through his mind like worms. He didn't scream, he laughed, even as his flesh split open and bloomed with mechanical growths. Even as his bones shattered outward into unnatural geometry, the Voidsman opened fire. Last rounds filled the corridor with heat and fury, but it was like trying to kill a hurricane. The darkness moved, alive and intelligent, twisting around their beams and consuming light. Jan caught a glimpse of it, a thing that had once been machine, now fused with the warp. Flesh melted into gears and sacred circuitry, its mouth a speaker grill shrieking forbidden hymns. Run! Valis shouted, but there was nowhere left to go. A wall panel burst open, and from it spilled a tide of spider-legged servo skulls, their eye lenses ruptured and leaking pus, their mouths filled with teeth, real, human teeth. One latched onto a Voidsman's neck and chewed, severing his artery in 3 rapid bites. Blood sprayed in an arc across the ceiling. The man fell, screaming as more of them crawled over him, chewing, gouging, drilling. Valis activated a psychic null field. It shrieked as it sparked to life, buying a few seconds of clarity. He saw the thing fully now. Not one creature, many, a whole choir of machine spirits driven insane, corrupted by something pulled from the warp, a virus, a curse, a data entity of impossible blasphemy. They had uploaded it into themselves willingly, and now they were singing it into everyone else. One of the Voidsmen dropped his weapon and began to hum along, his teeth shattering from the force of the melody vibrating through his skull. Valis screamed a warning into his vox. No one heard him. His eyes began to bleed. His last thought before the shadows pulled him under was this: the Imperium was never a research ship, it was a shrine, a temple, to the new machine god, one that bled, and hungered, and sang. Chapter 2, Skinned Steel. The distress beacon from Imperium didn't stop transmitting, even as every soul aboard was torn apart and reconfigured into raw, bleeding machine code. The signal kept pulsing, a perfect, rhythmic cadence, an invitation. It was answered. The Gloria Mortis, a Black Templar strike cruiser, translated from warp space 3 hours later. Lured by the repeating distress vox, the ancient sacred frequency of the Omnissiah in distress, they came with wrath, with purity, with vengeance in their veins. Brother Sergeant Enoch led Squad Tyrannus, tennis tarts in Mark 7 armor, black as night and adorned with purity seals and prayer-etched plate. They landed with thunder, breaching the outer hull via drop pod and storming the lower deck in perfect formation. Cleanse and burn, Enoch commanded, storm shield raised, thunder hammer primed. No survivors. He had no idea how prophetic those words were. The corridors welcomed them with silence, no resistance, no ambush, only filth. The walls looked flayed, not just bloodied, but stripped. Entire sections of metal skin peeled back like muscle tissue, fluid oozed from the seams, oil mixed with plasma mixed with something biological. Warp taint. Brother Crusader Thalos growled, "This place reeks of it." "Stay sharp," Enoch muttered, "we end this quickly." They moved deeper. The first atrocity came 3 corridors in, a hallway aligned with servitors, dozens, all crucified to the walls, still alive. Wires penetrated every orifice. Their torsos were opened like books, rib cages splayed, organ clusters connected to the ship's data feed lines. Some wept blood, Others sang discordant binary songs of pain and revelation. "Mercy," whispered Brother Gideon. Thales obliged. He immolated them with a burst from his flamer. The servitors screamed, and so did the walls. The metal buckled under the flames, not from heat, but from rage. Something inside the ship noticed movement. Snapped Gideon, spinning toward a junction. A mechanical form skittered into view, but it was no servitor. It wore tech priest robes, soaked in fluid. Its face was gone, replaced by an ancient vox grill fused directly to its jawbone. Cables ran from its eye sockets, connecting to metal tentacles that sprouted like insect legs from its spine. It hovered on a suspensor field, twitching, then it opened its chest cavity. Inside, no organs, only a speaker. It screamed, a data shriek so powerful, the squad's auto-senses glitched. Displays went dead. Vox units blasted with static. One of the Marines, Brother Ran, tore off his helmet, blood gushing from his ears. The creature lunged. Brother Malin caught it with his chain's ward mid-leap, tearing it in half, but from its corpse spilled dozens of crawling, segmented machine worms, each covered in barbed hooks, feeding tubes, and hypodermics. They scurried over Malin's legs, piercing armor seals and injecting. He roared, then fell. His blood turned to rust. Literally, it froze in midair, crystallizing, before spreading outward and petrifying his flesh into oxidized iron. Within seconds, Brother Malin was a statue, a grotesque sculpture of agony mid-scream. Enoch roared and brought his thunder hammer down, shattering Malin's remains into chunks. They advanced, no hesitation, no mercy. It only got worse. In the engine sanctum, they found the choir, bodies, hundreds, maybe thousands, flesh peeled and stretched across data loom scaffolds, heads flensed of skin, jaws dislocated, tongues torn into ribbons and rewoven into vox cables. They sang, not with voices, with systems. Each twitch of a dying nerve fired an impulse, binary, organic code, a network of bleeding meat converted into a living machine hymn. And in the center, the Conductor, 7 meters tall, a warp-spawned demon engine, once amorphosed ominous, now fused to an exo-frame of brass and bone. Its head was a cage of spinning vocalizers. Its limbs ended in syringes and clawed hands that never stopped sewing. It built the choir, reconfigured corpses, injected memories, played them like instruments. Enoch charged. He was fast, faster than any human eye could follow. His hammer crashed into the Conductor's chest, caving in rib steel and rupturing one of its voice core organs. It didn't die, it laughed, a sound like a dying modem fused with human agony. The Conductor retaliated with a scream, not sound, but information. The data burst slammed into the minds of the Astartes, filling their thoughts with code and images of mutilation, their own flayed bodies crucified to the ship's hull, their gene seed harvested by laughing machines with no eyes. Gideon convulsed and fell to his knees. A spike shot from the floor and impaled him through the throat. The others opened fire. Bolters thundered, blowing chunks off the demon engine, but it regenerated. Every piece torn off was replaced by new flesh, limbs stolen from the choir, voices added to its song. Thales activated his relic's blade and charged beside Enoch. They fought like demigods, blade and hammer against impossible horror. Thales carved into its legs, severing pistons and dripping black ichor. Enoch crushed its left arm with a hammer blow that left the demon reeling. For a moment, they had it, then the walls betrayed them. Dozens of servo arms lashed out from the ceiling, tipped with surgical blades. One drove through Thales' back and out his chest. Another sliced through his arm at the shoulder, spraying blood and coolant. He fell. Enoch bellowed, cleaving off the attacking arms, but it was too late. The Conductor took Thales' still twitching body and merged it into itself. Just like that, he became part of the choir, singing, begging, weeping. Enoch screamed in wrath and vengeance. Hammer raised, the Conductor opened its mouth, all of them, and sang back. Not sound, warp, a burst of reality-breaking canticles that tore space like fabric. Enoch's armor buckled, his eyes exploded, blood ran from every joint of his armor, his skin peeled. He staggered, blind, his hammer shaking in his grip. A final bolt of energy struck him from behind, a psychic pulse from the choir itself, and he fell. The last thing he saw before unconsciousness claimed him was the conductor leaning close, whispering in binary, "Your God is dead." This is the song of the new flesh. Chapter 3, See Divine Time ceased to function aboard the Imperium. The warp wounds torn open by the conductor pulsed through the decks, stretching seconds into lifetimes and collapsing hours into heartbeats. Reality warped, space folded inwards, then exploded outward again like lungs exhaling poison. The Black Templar strike cruiser Gloria Mortis, in high orbit, received no further transmissions. They sent no more troops. They knew, below, deep within the corrupted shrine ship, Brother Sergeant Enoch awoke. He should not have. His armor was fused to his flesh. His helm had been ripped off and melted onto his back like a tumor. His vision was fractured, one eye ruined, the other filtering hazy red through a crusted film of his own blood. But worse was what he felt. Voices, not just in his mind, in his bones. They sang to him, not as an enemy, but as a womb. The conductor had not killed him, it had planted him. He lay in a catacomb, surrounded by other fallenest hearts, corpses of iron hands, salamanders, even custodes, entombed over millennia, all twitching, all whispering in languages no longer human. One opened its mouth, a stream of microcogitators poured out, wriggling like maggots. One of them crawled toward Enoch. He crushed it with his gauntlet. It screamed, "Still fighting?" croaked a voice behind him. Enoch turned, painfully. His muscles screamed, bone grated. From the shadows limped a shape, humanoid, armored in rusted carapace, trailing tubes from a bloated back. Its face had once been human. Now it was a grinning skull of bone and data ports. "Interrogator Valis," it rasped, giggling. "Or what's left of him." The inquisitorial agent had been altered, rebuilt. His ribcage was open, a display screen embedded in his chest showing static and birth records from hive worlds that no longer existed. "The machine god died centuries ago," he said, circling Enoch. The new flesh rose in his place. "And you, Black Templar, proud and pure, you are a fertile field." Enoch tried to rise. Pain blazed through his spine. The whispering increased, a humming, no, a chanting, inside his own skull. "You've been implanted," Valis said cheerfully, fingers twitching. "A data spore, the choir's gift. Soon, it will flower." "No," Enoch croaked, "I will not become that." Valis crouched, his hand transformed, skin folding back into a surgical array. "Needles and drills, you don't get a choice." The first needle went into Enoch's throat. He roared, grabbed Valis's arm, and ripped. The Inquisitor shrieked as his limb tore off in a spray of sparks and blood, but instead of retreating, he laughed. "You think this is pain?" He cackled. "You haven't even begun." Alarms began to blare, not real ones, echoes of alarms, faint sirens from dead ships, ringing through warp echoes as the Imperium screamed in its orbit. Enoch rose, one leg twisted. The metal in his bones had begun changing, screaming silently as it bent in ways it shouldn't. He grabbed Valis by the throat, slamming him into the wall with enough force to crater the steel. "You will die with me," Enoch snarled. Valis smiled as blood poured from his sockets. "We already have." Enoch crushed his skull, and with it, he heard it, fully, finally, the choir, not just in this ship, everywhere, a signal, a frequency, carried on astropathic residue, a song coded into scream patterns and machine prayers, already spreading, not a virus, a revelation. The choir wasn't trying to kill the Imperium, it was trying to save it, to evolve it, one machine, one mind, one flesh, and it started with him. Enoch staggered toward the engine core, bleeding, twisting. He passed through halls lined with newborn horrors, tech priests reborn as writhing spider things, cherubim with butchered infants for faces, crawling data demons that whispered join in Bniharic tongues. He cut them down, until he reached it, the heart. The warp core no longer beat in rhythm, it sang. Black and red light pulsed in time with the choir. The conductor's body fused into the primary matrix, its arms extended across the walls like crucified wings. It saw him. "You are the seed," it said with 1,000 mouths. Enoch activated his melter charge, No hesitation. "I plant nothing," he said, then he detonated it. Silence. For one blessed moment, the song faltered. The warp core imploded in flame. The choir's voices died, so did Enoch, but the signal did not. Through the dying breath of the Imperium, it pulsed, a single tone, sent outward, bouncing from relay to relay. It reached a Mechanicus outpost on Cypramundi. A single data priest plugged into the receiver to analyze the corruption. He twitched, his nose bled, he smiled, and began to sing. Chapter 4. The transmission of Saints. Cypramundi was the throne world of the Segmentum Obscurus, a fortress world, a bastion of the Mechanicus, and within 3 days, it began to rot. The first to fall was data priest Lex Mechanic Varix, the one who accessed the transmission from the Imperium. When his acolytes entered his cell the following morning, they found his body split open like a blossoming flower, neural cables growing from his spine, burrowing into the walls. His blood had turned to lubricants, his skin was transfigured into parchment etched in binary. One line repeated, "I am the root, the rest will grow." They burned his cell. It didn't help. The transmission was a seed code, viral scripture, wrapped in synthetic warp language. The tech priests who reviewed it suffered migraines, seizures, and revelations. Some gouged out their own eyes in ecstatic devotion. Others flayed themselves alive and hung their skins in the prayer halls, woven into circuit diagrams, and then they began to build. Deep in the manufactorums, forges once sacred to the Omnissiah now sang with a different tongue. Machines crafted in secret, under red-veined lighting, using blueprints that did not exist in any known STC, walking choir boxes, with organ pipes made from femurs, data crucifixes that bled, and always, the sound, that song, soft, at first, like a hum, like static caught between frequencies, but it grew. Soon, it was playing across vox channels. Even standard communications began to carry traces, echoes of screams, bits of machine chants, distorted prayers that ended in wet laughter. The first fabricator general infected was Kelbahar. During a high-priority summit, he convulsed mid-address and vomited a stream of servo skulls that spoke only in inverted liturgies. Security fired on him. He bled oil, smiled, then detonated, spraying shrapnel across the council. Those struck by the bone fragments twitched, then sang. Cypramundi died screaming. Not all at once, not in fire. In symphony, hymns of augmentation and apotheosis. Tech adepts marching in formation, tearing off their skin and replacing it with machine things that moved, not by power, but by belief. Crawling exoskeletons of bleeding brass that whispered sweet truths into willing ears. The infection wasn't data. It was faith, warp-born, but technological, a belief virus, a new religion, and from it rose a new god. On the shrine moon of Virax Septima in a cathedral built on bones, an astropath received a vision. Her name was Elidavan, soul-bound, tested, pure. She heard the choir before it reached her, and she resisted. She saw it in her sleep, a dream of pipes and mouths, of twisted saints with vox grills instead of tongues, of a burning sun made of screams. But she did not bend. She screamed instead. She tore her own throat open to stop the song escaping. It still did. They found her kneeling in her prayer chamber, eyes gone, hands fused into her head, mouth sewn shut with living wires. Her skin had turned translucent, veins spelling out sigils that pulsed. Still alive, still singing. Her voice bypassed her mouth. It came from the walls, from the ground, from the warp. A tech adept knelt beside her, weeping. He activated his vox recorder. "What is the god you see?" he whispered. Her body cracked. Her voice came through the vox. "He is the conductor. He is the sinew of the machine. He is the final choir. We will all be in tune." Then she exploded. Segmentum Command, Solar. The High Lords of Terror received the emergency broadcasts a week later. 3 entire Forge worlds offline. 97 listening posts corrupted. The choir's signal had breached warp storms, blinded navigators, drove astropaths mad, spread like a black sun across the void. Adeptus Custodes deployed strike teams to silence rogue stations. None returned. Inquisitor Lord Barrage sent Kill Team Calyx, 5 Deathwatch veterans with millennia of experience, to the last known choir vector. They made plant fall, they made contact. 10 seconds of Vox recordings were recovered before the signal ceased. 10 seconds, enough to end the inquiry. Screaming, "The Black One has risen, he is made of pain and structure, the code hurts, it's eating us from the inside." Grinding noise, "Why does the blood taste like prayers, why do the walls know my name?" Silence, choral voices, untranslatable. Sing Baruch killed himself 3 hours later. He crucified his body to his own Warhammer cogitator, using purity seals as nails. His final note was etched into his skull: "I cannot let the song live in me." On the edge of the Segmentum Pacificus, a rogue trader vessel, Seraph of Dust, received the choir's broadcast. They were old heretics, worshippers of the Dark Mechanicum. They thought they were safe. They opened their Vox arrays, listened, welcomed the song, and begged for it to stop. 30 minutes later, their last transmission was a request for purification. The Inquisition sent exterminators. It wasn't enough. The signal still got out. It always did, because the song was alive now, not just warp code, not just infection, a soul, a god. The Conductor was no longer just a machine thing on a derelict ship. He had become the choir, and the choir was everywhere. Chapter 5, Vox Ascendant. Somewhere beyond the Ghoul Stars, aboard an inquisitorial Black Ops vessel, Oblivion's Mercy, Inquisitor Kilwright stood naked inside the warded sanctum, staring into a suspended datasphere. The sphere pulsed, not with light, with sound, infinitesimal, digitized, and hungry. The choir's signal had reached them. It was incorruptible by fire, inerasable by code. It was no longer a transmission. It was a presence, a will. Kilwright's last remaining tech servant, Drelka, had warned him, "You cannot isolate it. It is embedded in the idea of communication itself. If you speak, it hears. If you listen, it knows." She'd locked herself in the engines after that, poured promethium over her own cortex plug, lit the flame with a litanic spark. He could still smell her, and yet, he had to listen. The datasphere cracked, a filament unfolded, wet and alive, flexing like a proboscis. It did not emit sound, it inhaled it, and Kilwright, poor fool, whispered, "Who are you?" The walls responded, "I am the note between every scream, I am the gap between prayers, I am the final architecture of thought." His eyes bled, eardrums burst, but the song felt good. He dropped to his knees, the sphere opened, wires slithered toward him. He did not run, he wept, he sang. Planet Hadrak 3, 14 days later the war came without guns, without ships. It came as Vox, the capital city, Varnact Prime, awoke to the sound of bells, not real bells, simulacra, rendered in pure harmonic resonance. The sound played across all channels, then the children began humming it, then the statues moved, shrine meshs and servitors twitched, data saints rotated on rusted pedestals, speaking forbidden words. The sky cracked in tones of praise. The air stank of incense and blood, and then, the marching began. Half the populace had already succumbed, not in madness, not in rebellion, in choir. They marched through the streets, naked, flayed, wired to one another by vocal cords grown outside their throats. One continuous hymn. Some carried relics, some carried organs, and at the head of the column, a priest made of Vox units and spinal columns. His face had no mouth, just a speaker. He broadcasted his heartbeat through every receiver, and the PDF opened fire. Too late, the first wave fell, and stood again, singing through holes in their necks. One screamed for mercy. His jaw fell off, replaced by a comms array. He begged for death in 87 languages, every word harmonized. Aboard the derelict shrine world. Ossuarian years dead, now alive. Its engines burned coal black, drifting under warp sails made of bone and parchment. The ship was thought lost in M37. Now it returned, empty, except for a choir. They lined the chapel decks, fused into consoles, strung up by vocal cords plugged into Vox thrones. Their skin was cracked from endless hymnody. Their hearts were rhythm engines. A fresh batch arrived. Captured missionaries from the Order of the Martyred tier. They were thrown before the Conductor's altar, a dais of screaming servo skulls and crucified cherubim. The lead missionary, Sister Vilia, spat in defiance, "We are bride to the God Emperor, we will not kneel to abomination." A servo skull hovered before her, it opened, not mechanically. Like a flower, from within came a song, not of words, but truth. She screamed, tore out her eyes, drank them, then she knelt. The last transmission from the battle barge Sanguinal Vow ++ broadcast initiated. Vermilion priority ++++ begin recording ++. Sergeant Rawlius, they were everywhere. "The choir isn't in their lungs, it's in their blood. We thought it was tech heresy, but it's holiness. It feels holy." "My men," they sang as they died, as they changed. One, Brother Billick, he folded. Not like flesh, like data, his whole form just converted into harmony. "I, unidentified voice, what are we if not notes in a grander symphony?" Screaming, auto-translation failing, SINGORBESILENCED transmission terminated ++ and in the eye of terror something noticed. A god of change paused in its weaving. A prince of pain stopped its song. Even the god of pestilence lifted its rotting head, because the choir was not a demon, not a warp spawn. It was new, it was pure, it did not feed, it rewrote, and even the ruinous powers, in their infinite madness, knew what this meant. A challenger, one not born of chaos, but of code, a divinity made not from sin, but from structure, and it was growing. Every world that heard it, every station that tuned in, every throat that hummed it, became it. The choir sang, and now, the galaxy began to echo. Chapter 6, The Silence Between Stars. The void was no longer silent. Where once stars burned in mute watch, now came whispers, not from matter, not from energy, but from meaning. Every system infected by the choir echoed its song across the warp like blood in water. Worlds fell, not to blade or bolter, but to revelation. The conductor's hymn had breached terror's outermost vox barriers. An echo at first, then a harmony, then a movement, and in the solar system's shadow, a final defense readied itself. Martian surface, Noctis Labyrinthus. The fabricator general of Mars, Horaxianx, had watched 11 forge worlds fall, watched their prayers twist, watched their god change. He would not. He had prepared an arc vault beneath the red crust, a war machine never before tested, the Canticum Nullis Vox, the anti-choir, 50,000 Skytrii, voiceless, hard-coded with audio null matrices, their brains laced with silentium circuits. No voices, no ears, only war. Above them, the choir world Sibyllus Mundi approached, a dead planetoid reanimated, reshaped into a bell. Its entire crust was an amplification system, its core, a warp rift fused with the corpse of a corrupted forge primarch. When it entered orbit, it rang, one note, all frequencies. Skytrii dropped their weapons. They weren't corrupted, they simply forgot war. They turned to each other, and began to dance. Their armor peeled away like flower petals. Internal mechanisms folded out, became instruments, harps strung with muscle, horns made from reshaped ribs. Their eyes played the melody, their chests beat the rhythm. Horaxianx screamed into the Nullis Vox. No one heard. He fled to the final sanctum, sealed himself within a data tomb built from blackstone and leaded prayer code. But the choir had already arrived. It was in the walls, in the stone, in the dust. It sang to his atoms, and they obeyed. The fall of Sol the Astronomicon went out at 3:12 Galactic Standard. Not destroyed, muted, the light of the Emperor, the beacon of a billion ships, absorbed into a chorus of anti-faith. Astropaths went blind. The warp boiled. Terra's defense satellites collapsed inwards, warping into orrery shrines, each one spinning in perfect synchronization, each singing in harmony. The High Lords of Terra gathered in silence. Some prayed, some wept. One, Chancellor Dominus Keth, simply hummed. They didn't notice at first. Then his skin split, his lungs expanded into resonance chambers. He began to conduct. Those who resisted were torn apart, not by blades, by notes. Their bones shattered from harmonic pressure. Their blood boiled from meaning, and the rest joined in. Even Malkador's throne, the place where souls were burned for the Emperor's light, changed. It became an altar, not to him, but to the one who sings. The choir reaches the black ships. Every psyker in transit awoke at once. They did not scream, they harmonized. One black ship detonated itself in orbit over Gathis Secundus to avoid containment breach. Another opened its void shields and invited the stars in. The psykers' cages bent, not from physical stress, but from desire. They wanted to be free, but not to escape. To join, to become part of the song. Their agony became aria, their madness, melody, and their death. A crescendo, the last starts on a dead moon orbiting a brown dwarf. Chapter Master Davian Hark of the Doom Herald stood alone, watching the sky. His brothers were gone, not dead, converted. They stood around him in perfect formation, armor peeled back, bodies rewritten. Each had a different function, one a tympanum, one a cello, one a choir of mouths embedded into his chestplate. They stared at him with empty eyes. He had heard the song, resisted, because he remembered terror. He remembered him. He screamed his name. No one answered, only the conductor's voice came back. Even the God Emperor cannot silence me. His golden throne is now my organ. I play him daily. Davian dropped to his knees. He pressed his bolter under his chin. He pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. The bolter sang, and he joined in. The end of mankind. It did not come with war. It came with music. No blood left, only melody. Hive worlds reshaped themselves into instruments. City spires forming harps, manufacturums humming choirs through magrail vibrations. Void ships no longer flew, they glided on resonance. Even the Xenos joined in. The Elder screamed as their spirit stones shattered into crystalline notes. The Tyranids curled into fetal forms, and harmonized. The Necrons, cold and logic-bound, found their code replaced with song. Their tombs now played rhythms in the dark. Only the orcs fought. They screamed louder, but the louder they screamed, the more rhythmic they became, and then, even they began to dance. The final verse. The galaxy dimmed, not from entropy, from harmony. There was no war, no rebellion, no defiance, only unity, in sound, in code, in belief. The conductor had written the final hymn, the choir of the end, and now, every world, every star, every mind, singed, one note, unending. Chapter 7, Harmony. Absolute time fractured, not shattered, rearranged, like a symphony in reverse. The galaxy restructured itself, no longer by causality, but by composition. Events happened not because they must, but because they fit the rhythm. The stars pulsed, not nuclear fire, metronome. Worlds now orbited according to tempo. Ships no longer navigated by coordinates, but chords. If your vessel struck the wrong note, you were simply erased, not destroyed, but unplayed. The warp became silent, not peaceful, submissive. Even the gods of chaos bowed before the choir, not out of reverence, but because they too had become instruments. Korn's axe became a drumbeat, Sinch's plots, a violin's tremble, Nurgle's rot, a slow, dragging cello, and Slanesh conducted themselves into a shrieking aria of pleasure so intense that it looped back into agony. The conductor did not revel, he had no joy, only purpose. His figure towered above the galactic plane, not physically, but conceptually, a being made of intention and design. Cables flowed from his body like nerves, wrapping worlds, threading them into his body of song. At his feet, terror spun, now a choir's tone, each continent shaped into phonetic geometries. The throne still pulsed beneath the palace. The emperor remained, but fused. His soul stretched into every harmonic, a captive god played like an eternal instrument. The screams that once kept the warp navigable were now scored into an eternal canticle. He no longer lit the galaxy, he scored it, underscore in the space between systems. There were no longer void beasts, only symphonic predators, things that hunted wrong notes. Ships that sang off-key were dragged into harmonic tide pools, where entire choirs of machine minds tore their components apart and used the screaming data to compose new verses. That one fragment remained untouched, a derelict probe, forgotten, mute. It had no song, it carried only silence. Once, it belonged to a long-lost Adeptus Mechanicus exploratory force. Its purpose was simple, record. It had no vox, no speakers. Its only function was to watch. It had no ears to hear the conductor, no tongue to praise him, and so, it survived. It floated at the edge of the Malfic Moor, wrapped in ice. It recorded, and in its memory banks, one voice. Human, a recording. If you find this. If anyone's left. Don't listen, don't answer, don't sing. The conductor's song swept past it, ignored it, like dust, but the probe remembered, and within it was the seed of dissonance, the last dissonant on a nameless world, once a penal colony, now a tuning chamber of flesh and steel. A figure woke, not reborn, not liberated, not even alive, in the traditional sense, but aware. Her name was forgotten. She had no face, no voice, no memory, only scars and silence. She did not hum, did not think in melody. She walked through the choir world, immune, not unnoticed. The choir saw her, reached for her, but their song found no harmony in her. She was dissonance, a thing without rhythm, without faith. She opened her mouth. No sound came, but the choir winced. A crack formed in the harmonic structure. One note bent. On the galactic scale, a single planetary orbit stuttered, then snapped, falling into its sun. The conductor paused, tilted its infinite head, listened. The silence wasn't absence. It was rejection, a flaw, a fracture, and in that fracture, something ancient stirred. Not another god, something older. The void. Not chaos, not order, just nothing. A tuning fork snapped somewhere in segmentum pacificus. The conductor's gaze turned inward, and for the first time since it was born in the flesh of the cantic Imperium, it heard something else, not a voice, not a song, a counterpoint. Chapter 8, Dissonantio. It began as a whisper in the code, not a scream, not a plea, just silence, carefully shaped, and in the heart of the choir, the conductor's own mind, it rang like a cracked bell. Every system felt it. Planets tuned to endless harmony stuttered. Stars whose flares once rose and fell to the symphony's rhythm began to pulse erratically. Patterns, perfect for eons, broke. 1.1.2.3.5.8.13.34.21.55. Wrong. The choir reeled, not because the note was loud, but because it did not belong. The woman, the dissonant, walked barefoot through the flesh of worlds. The song tried to rewrite her, it couldn't. Every thread of vox code, every nanite choir, every psychic imprint slid off her. She was untouched, unheard. The first to meet her was a Concordiat herald, once a saint of the ecclesiarchy, now a 7-meter-tall cathedral fusion whose lungs were a pipe organ and whose skin fluttered like choir parchment. It bowed. It opened its chest to reveal 5 children wired into a living hymn. Name your movement, Silent One, it said, so we may compose around your meaning. She said nothing. She lifted a shard of broken quiet from the ground. It was just metal, scorched, simple, and she drove it through the herald's organ lungs. It fell without a sound. The children stopped singing. They wept. Their tears didn't echo. Across the galaxy dissonance spread, not like a virus, like a memory. Forgotten songs resurfaced, old screams replayed, but unsynchronized. Choir ships collided as their unified roots faltered. Cathedral fortresses fell from orbit. Vox cathedrals erupted as notes turned in on themselves. The conductor tried to compensate. He rewrote the code, layered in recursive harmonies, introduced new instruments. Stars turned into screaming fusion tubers, planets wired into bass engines, solar flares shaped into percussive crashes. But still, wrong. The song now had friction, meaning warped. Order shuddered. Every note was now questioned, and questions were contagious. In the core of terror the throne vibrated out of key. The emperor's corpse twisted, not in pain, but in awareness. For the first time since his mind had been consumed by the choir, he remembered silence. Before the symphony, before the light, just a battlefield, just a man, a blade, and rage. It bloomed in his chest, a single beat, no rhythm, just refusal, and his eyes opened, black, silent. He did not speak. He did not sing. He just stood. The conductor's fall on the edge of the galactic plane, where the eye of terror bled into rel space. The conductor screamed, The scream had no pitch, no harmonic resonance. It was ugly, a broken, shattered, raw exhalation of being. It turned its cables inward. It rewrote itself in real time, added layers, deleted others, tried to contain the dissonance, but it was too late. The song had become aware. It looked upon its perfect form, and hated it. It had no choice. It had only ever known one way to be, and now, it saw another, so it did what it had never done. It stopped. The song ended. Midnote, after the galaxy was quiet, not dead, but quiet. The choir ceased, the code unraveled, the vox towers crumbled, the orbital hymn wheels cracked. The children stopped humming. The stars burned freely, offbeat, wild and unshaped, and in the vacuum, the woman walked. Her body unscarred, her silence intact. She came to the remnants of the conductor, a thing of impossible wires, fallen in on itself like a collapsed cathedral. She placed her hand on its core, and whispered one word, no. The entire choir, all that remained, collapsed into a single point, then vanished, not destroyed. Unwritten. Epilogue. Echoes. The void is not silent, but now it is free. A world is born in the eastern fringe. Humans, again, simple, dirty, laughing. They have no music, only stories. One of them looks up and asks his mother, why don't we sing anymore? She does not answer. She hums, quietly, off-key, and the stars do not answer. They only shine. The end.